Maria Elena wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stared at the massive steel safe in Vincent Castellano's private office, its door hanging wide open like a mouth revealing secrets worth $20 million in cash, diamonds, and casino ownership documents. Her cleaning cart trembled in her grip as she realized the most powerful man in Las Vegas had either made the biggest mistake of his life or was testing her in a way that could destroy everything she had fought to build. Inside that safe lay enough money to cure her daughter Sophia's leukemia, pay off the medical bills drowning their family, and give them the life she had promised her dying husband she would provide. But Maria Elena knew that one wrong move would not only cost her the job she desperately needed, but could put both her and her 12-year-old daughter in mortal danger. 6 months earlier, Maria Elena had arrived in Las Vegas with nothing but 2 suitcases, a folder full of medical records, and the determination of a mother watching her only child fade away. Sophia's leukemia had already claimed their house in Phoenix, their savings, and Roberto's construction business when the medical bills became impossible. Roberto had worked himself to death trying to pay for treatments, collapsing on a job site after pulling 18-hour shifts for 3 weeks straight. Maria Elena found herself a 34-year-old widow with a sick child, drowning in debt that grew by thousands every week. The casino cleaning job at the Palazzo Diamante paid minimum wage, but it was the only work she could find that offered health insurance and allowed her to work night shifts, while Sophia slept at their tiny studio apartment 12 blocks from the Strip. Vincent Castellano owned half of Las Vegas and had a reputation that kept both politicians and criminals walking carefully around him. His casino empire had been built through a combination of brilliant business instincts and absolutely ruthless elimination of anyone who crossed him. Maria Elena had worked in his building for 6 months, arriving every night at 11 p.m. to clean offices that smelled of expensive cigars and fear. But she had only seen him twice, both times from a distance, as he moved through the casino floor, surrounded by men in expensive suits who watched everything with predator eyes. The other cleaning staff whispered stories about people who had crossed Vincent, employees who had skimmed money or revealed secrets, and how they simply disappeared without anyone asking questions. But Maria Elena also heard different whispers from the casino workers, stories about unexpected acts of generosity, college tuitions paid for dealers' children, mortgages mysteriously settled for long-time employees, and a complex man who inspired both terror and strange loyalty. Tonight felt different from the moment she stepped off the service elevator onto the executive floor. The usual security guard was missing from his post. The hallway lights were dimmed lower than normal, and when she used her key card to enter Vincent's office, she found him sitting behind his massive mahogany desk in the dark, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the glittering chaos of Las Vegas spread out 40 stories below. He did not acknowledge her presence as she began her routine, emptying trash cans and dusting surfaces with the quiet efficiency that had kept her invisible and employed for 6 months. She was cleaning the bookshelf when she heard the soft electronic beep and mechanical click of the safe opening behind her. Maria Elena Santos, mother of Sofia Santos, age 12, diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia 14 months ago at Phoenix Children's Hospital. Vincent's voice cut through the silence like a blade, making her freeze with the dust cloth still in her hand. Medical debt currently standing at $437,000 and growing by approximately $8,000 per month with current treatment protocols. Husband Roberto Santos died of heart failure 6 months ago after working himself to death trying to pay for treatments that were not even slowing the cancer's progression. She turned slowly to face him, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears, and saw him still sitting in shadow while behind him the safe stood open, its interior lights illuminating stacks of cash that seemed to glow like promises in the darkness. He had investigated her, knew everything about her life, her failures, her desperation, and now he was playing some kind of game that she could not understand, but knew would determine whether Sophia lived or died. "You have been stealing from me for 3 months," Vincent continued, in that same emotionless tone that made her legs feel like water. $50 here, 75 there, never enough to trigger the automated accounting systems, but enough to buy your daughter's medication when the insurance delays approval. You thought you were clever, taking small amounts from different petty cash boxes, varying your methods, always replacing the money within 2 weeks when your paycheck came through. Maria Elena's world collapsed around her as she realized he knew about every desperate choice she had made. Every night she had lain awake calculating whether Sophia would survive until the insurance company decided to cover a treatment they had approved 6 months earlier. She had never thought of it as stealing because she always paid it back, borrowing against her future paychecks to keep Sophia alive through the bureaucratic maze that seemed designed to let children die while adults shuffled papers and counted profits. "I always put it back," she whispered, her voice barely audible even in the silent office. "Every dollar, I always paid it back within 2 weeks. I swear on my daughter's life. I never kept anything. I just needed to buy her medicines when the insurance made us wait." Vincent finally turned his chair to face her, and in the dim light from the window, she could see his face was not showing the anger she expected, but something far more complex and unreadable. He was older than she had realized, probably in his mid-50s, with silver threading through his dark hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of years carrying burdens that bent lesser men. His suit probably cost more than she made in 6 months, but there was something in his expression that reminded her of Roberto during those final weeks when he knew he was losing the battle to save their family. "The safe contains approximately $20.3 million in cash and negotiable instruments," he said, gesturing toward the open vault without taking his eyes off her face. "Enough money to save your daughter's life 50 times over. Enough to buy the best treatment in the world. Enough to ensure she never wants for anything. It has been open for 17 minutes while you continued cleaning my office, working around it as if $20 million was nothing more than an interesting piece of furniture." Maria Elena stared at him, trying to understand what game he was playing, why he was torturing her with the sight of everything she needed but could never have. The money seemed to pulse in her peripheral vision like a heartbeat, calling to the desperate mother who would have sold her soul to save Sophia, but she had learned through months of impossible choices that nothing in life was simple, and every offer that seemed too good to be true usually demanded a price that destroyed everything you were trying to save. "Most people who work for me would have already started calculating how much they could take before I noticed," Vincent continued, his voice carrying a strange note that might have been either disappointment or something approaching respect. "They would be planning elaborate schemes to access that safe, or at least trying to photograph the contents for future blackmail opportunities. You have been in this room with an open safe containing more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes, and you have done nothing but continue cleaning around it as if it did not exist." "Because it is not mine," Maria Elena replied, her voice growing stronger as she realized this was some kind of test and her daughter's future might depend on how she answered. "Because stealing is wrong, no matter how desperate you are, no matter how good your reasons. Because the kind of person who would take money that does not belong to them is not the kind of person who deserves to be Sophia's mother." Vincent stood up slowly, his tall frame unfolding from the chair like a dangerous predator deciding whether to strike or spare its prey. He walked around the desk to stand directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne and see the way his dark eyes seemed to be weighing her soul against some invisible scale that would determine her fate. 3 months ago, my security team brought me footage of a cleaning woman taking money from petty cash boxes throughout this building. he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. They wanted to have you arrested, prosecuted, made an example of to discourage other employees from thinking they could steal from Vincent Castellano without consequences. They presented me with evidence that would have put you in prison for 5 years and left your daughter to die in the state foster system. Maria Eleanor felt the room spinning around her as she realized how close she had come to losing everything, how her desperate attempts to keep Sophia alive had nearly destroyed them both. She thought about her daughter lying in their studio apartment right now, probably awake, despite the late hour, because the pain medication made her restless, waiting for her mother to come home with stories about the interesting things she had seen in the fancy casino offices. I told them to continue monitoring you, but to take no action, Vincent continued, beginning to pace slowly around her like a shark circling potential prey. I wanted to understand what kind of person you were, whether you were a common criminal who happened to have a convenient excuse or something more complicated. For 3 months I have watched you through security cameras, read reports about every choice you made, every dollar you took and returned, every night you worked extra hours to earn money to pay back what you had borrowed. He stopped directly behind her, his presence looming like a storm cloud about to break, and Maria Elena realized she was holding her breath, waiting for him to pronounce her sentence. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the lights of Las Vegas sparkling like scattered diamonds, a city built on the dreams and desperation of people who came here seeking fortune and usually found only different kinds of ruin. What I discovered was a woman who stole money to save her daughter's life, but who had such a strong moral compass that she tortured herself to pay back every penny, even when she could barely afford food for herself. A mother who worked 2 jobs while caring for a dying child, but who never once considered taking more than the bare minimum she needed to survive the next crisis. A person who, when faced with more money than she could spend in a lifetime, continued mopping floors because she understood that character is defined by what you do when no one is watching. Vincent walked back around to face her, and this time she could see something in his expression that looked almost like pain, as if her story had opened old wounds he had spent years trying to heal. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope that he placed carefully on the desk between them. This envelope contains a cashier's check for $1.2 million, he said, his voice taking on a strange formality, as if he was conducting some kind of ceremony. It is made out to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which has the best pediatric leukemia treatment program in the world. It will cover all of Sophia's medical expenses for the next 5 years, including experimental treatments that are not available anywhere else, private rooms, and the kind of care that gives children like your daughter a 97% survival rate. Maria Elena stared at the envelope as if it might explode, her mind unable to process what he was telling her. $1.2 million was more money than she could earn in 30 years of working double shifts, more than enough to save Sophia's life and give her the future that had been stolen by cancer and medical bills. But nothing in her experience had taught her to trust gifts that seemed too good to be true, especially from men who commanded the kind of power that could destroy lives with a phone call. "What do you want from me?" she asked, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. No one gives away over $1 million without expecting something in return, especially not to a cleaning lady who has been stealing from them. What is the price for my daughter's life? Vincent smiled for the first time since she had entered his office, an expression that transformed his entire face from something intimidating into something almost human. He walked over to the safe and began pulling out stacks of cash, piling them on the desk until there was more money in front of her than she had ever seen outside of movies. 22 years ago, I had a daughter, he said, his voice becoming quiet and distant, as if he was speaking more to himself than to her. Isabella was 10 years old when she was diagnosed with the same type of leukemia that your Sophia is fighting now. My wife and I had all the money in the world, access to the best doctors, experimental treatments, private hospitals, everything that money could buy to save our little girl. He paused in his stacking of money, his hands becoming still as he stared down at the cash that represented power and possibilities, but had not been enough to save what mattered most to him. Maria Elena watched his face and saw the shadow of old grief that lived there permanently, the kind of pain that never fully healed but learned to exist alongside whatever joy life still offered. But 22 years ago, the treatments were not as advanced as they are today, Vincent continued, his voice barely above a whisper. The survival rates were lower, the side effects more devastating, and even with unlimited resources and the best medical team money could assemble, we lost her after 18 months of fighting a battle that seemed impossible to win. Isabella died in my arms at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and I swore on her grave that if I ever had the power to save another child from the same fate, I would not hesitate to use every resource at my disposal. Maria Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she realized this was not about testing her character or playing games with her desperation, but about a grieving father who had spent 2 decades looking for a way to honor his daughter's memory by saving other children who faced the same battle Isabella had lost. The money on the desk was not a business transaction or a manipulation, but an offering placed on the altar of love and loss, a way for him to transform his grief into hope for someone else's child. The price for your daughter's life is that you allow me to save her, Vincent said, picking up the envelope and holding it out toward her with hands that trembled slightly with emotion. The price is that you let a man who failed to save his own daughter succeed in saving yours. The price is that you give me the chance to look at Sophia and see the future that Isabella never got to have. Maria Elena took the envelope with shaking hands, feeling the weight of it not just in terms of money, but in terms of love and sacrifice, and the strange connections that sometimes form between broken people who recognize each other across the vast distances of different lives. She thought about Sophia waiting at home, probably trying to stay awake until her mother returned with stories about her night cleaning the offices where important people made decisions about things that seemed as distant as stars. There is one more thing, Vincent said, walking back to the safe and removing a smaller envelope that he placed beside the first one. This contains adoption papers that have been prepared by the best family law attorneys in Nevada. If you sign them, I will legally become Sophia's father, which will give her access to my family health insurance plan and ensure that she will never want for anything, regardless of what happens to either of us in the future. Maria Elena stared at him in shock, realizing he was offering not just to save Sophia's life, but to claim her as his own daughter, to give her a father who could protect her in ways that a casino cleaning lady never could. The magnitude of his offer overwhelmed her. The understanding that he was willing to make her child his heir, to share his empire and his legacy with a 12-year-old girl he had never met, because she reminded him of the daughter he had lost. "Why would you do this?" she whispered, her voice breaking as she tried to understand how the worst night of her life had become the moment when everything changed. "Why would you make my daughter your daughter, give her your name, your fortune, everything you have built? You do not even know her. You have never seen her smile or heard her laugh or watched her try to be brave when she is terrified." Vincent walked over to his desk and picked up a photograph that he handed to her, and Maria Elena saw the image of a beautiful little girl with dark hair and bright eyes, who looked remarkably similar to Sophia. Isabella Castellano had been captured in a moment of pure joy, laughing at something outside the frame, and looking exactly like the kind of child who would grow up to change the world if she had been given the chance. "Because every night for 22 years I have dreamed about the daughter I could not save," Vincent said, his voice thick with emotion that he had probably never allowed anyone else to witness. "Because I have built an empire that means nothing if it cannot be used to protect the children who need protection. Because Sophia is the same age Isabella was when we lost her, fighting the same disease in the same way. And this time, I have the power to change the ending of the story. Maria Elena understood then that this was about more than money or adoption papers or even saving Sophia's life. This was about a man who had spent 2 decades carrying the weight of his daughter's death, building power and wealth as a monument to her memory. And now he had found a way to transform that monument into something living and breathing and full of hope. "If I sign these papers, what happens to us?" she asked, needing to understand how their lives would change, whether she would still be Sophia's mother or become something else in this new configuration of family and love and obligation. "You become my partner in raising the daughter we both love," Vincent replied without hesitation. "You move into the penthouse apartment above this casino. Sophia gets the medical care she needs and the education she deserves, and you never clean another office unless you want to. We become a family built on the understanding that sometimes the most important relationships are chosen rather than born, forged in crisis, and strengthened by shared purpose." Maria Elena looked around the office that had been the setting for the most important conversation of her life, thinking about how she had entered this room as a desperate cleaning lady, stealing small amounts of money to keep her daughter alive, and was being offered the chance to leave as the partner of one of the most powerful men in Las Vegas and the mother of his chosen heir. The transformation seemed too dramatic to be real, but the envelope in her hands was solid and warm with possibility. "What if Sophia does not like you?" she asked, thinking about her daughter's fierce independence and stubborn streak that had helped her survive months of treatments that would have broken weaker children. "What if she does not want a new father? What if she thinks I'm replacing Roberto's memory with someone who can never understand what we have been through together?" Vincent smiled again, and this time the expression reached his eyes in a way that made him look like a completely different person than the intimidating casino owner she had feared for 6 months. He walked over to another desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder that he opened to reveal dozens of photographs, medical records, school reports, and what looked like a comprehensive file on Sophia's entire life. "I have been watching over Sophia for 3 months, he admitted, spreading some of the photographs across his desk so Maria Elena could see images of her daughter at the hospital, at school, playing in the small park near their apartment building. I hired private investigators to document her daily routine, her medical treatments, her friendships, her academic progress, everything that would help me understand the kind of child she is and what she would need to thrive in a different environment." Maria Elena felt a chill of fear as she realized the extent to which this powerful man had been monitoring her family. But as she looked at the photographs, she could see they had been taken with care and respect, capturing Sophia in moments of genuine happiness and showing the intelligence and determination that made her such a remarkable child despite everything she had endured. "She is brilliant," Vincent continued, pointing to a report card that showed straight A grades, despite months of missed school due to medical treatments. "Her teachers say she has an exceptional aptitude for mathematics and science, and her doctors say her positive attitude has been crucial to her survival so far. She reminds me of Isabella not just in appearance, but in spirit, in her refusal to let illness define her limitations." He picked up one particular photograph that showed Sophia sitting on a hospital bed, bald from chemotherapy, but smiling as she worked on what appeared to be a complicated math problem, and Maria Elena could see why this image would appeal to a man who had lost his own daughter to the same disease. "I want to meet her before we make any final decisions," Vincent said, his voice becoming gentle as he looked at the photograph. "I want to sit with Sophia and explain who I am, what I am offering, and let her decide whether she wants me to be her father. If she says no, the medical treatment still happens, the money is still hers, but we find a different arrangement that respects her choice and your authority as her mother." Maria Elena realized she was crying again, overwhelmed by the understanding that this man who commanded fear and respect throughout Las Vegas was willing to submit himself to the judgment of a 12-year-old girl, to let her decide whether his offer of love and protection was something she wanted to accept. The humility of that gesture, the recognition that Sophia's voice mattered in determining her own future, convinced Maria Elena that Vincent Castellano might actually understand what it meant to truly love a child. "She will want to know about Isabella," Maria Elena said, thinking about her daughter's insatiable curiosity and her tendency to ask direct questions that adults often found uncomfortable. "She will want to hear stories about your daughter, see pictures, understand what kind of person she was, and why saving Sophia's life is important to you." "I have been waiting 22 years for someone to ask me about Isabella," Vincent replied, his voice thick with emotion as he gathered the photographs back into their folder. "I have a room in my house that has been unchanged since the day she died, full of her books and toys and artwork, waiting for someone who would want to hear stories about the little girl who loved horses and mathematics and terrible jokes that she thought were hilarious." Maria Elena could picture Sophia in that room, surrounded by the belongings of another little girl who had faced the same battle, perhaps finding comfort in the connection to someone who had understood the fear and pain and stubborn hope that defined life with pediatric cancer. The image felt right in a way that surprised her, as if this unlikely family configuration was somehow meant to happen despite all the improbable circumstances that had brought them together. "When do you want to meet her?" Maria Elena asked, understanding that they had crossed some invisible line in their conversation and were now making plans rather than exploring possibilities. The envelope containing more money than she could comprehend was still in her hands, but it had become less important than the man standing in front of her and the future he was offering to the daughter she loved more than life itself. "Tomorrow evening, if she is feeling well enough," Vincent said, moving back to the safe to begin putting the stacks of money away. "I will send a car to bring both of you to my house. We will have dinner together, and I will answer every question Sophia has about who I am and what I'm proposing. If she likes me, if she feels comfortable with the idea, then we can begin making the arrangements for her treatment and our new family structure." Maria Elena watched him carefully, securing the safe, understanding that the test was over and she had somehow passed in ways she had not expected. The money that had seemed so important when she first saw it had become just one element in a much larger transformation that would affect every aspect of their lives. "What happens to my job here?" she asked, suddenly thinking about practical details that would need to be resolved. "Do I give notice to the cleaning service? Do I tell them I am quitting to become the partner of Vincent Castellano? Do I explain that my daughter is about to become the heir to a casino empire?" "You tell them whatever you are comfortable telling them," Vincent replied, closing the safe and spinning the combination lock with practiced efficiency. "Your employment here ends tonight, but your real work begins tomorrow when we start building a life that gives Sophia every opportunity she deserves and gives me a chance to be the father I always wanted to be but never got the time to become." Maria Elena stood in the office that had witnessed the most important conversation of her life, holding an envelope that contained her daughter's future, and looking at a man who had transformed from terrifying stranger to unlikely savior in the course of one impossible night. Through the windows, the lights of Las Vegas continued to sparkle like promises, but now they seemed less like symbols of other people's fortune and more like celebration of her own miraculous change of circumstances. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling inadequate for the magnitude of what he had offered, but being the only response that felt honest. "Thank you for choosing Sophia, for choosing us, for deciding that your grief could become our hope." Roberto would have loved knowing that his daughter found a father who understands what it means to fight for the people you love. Vincent walked her to the elevator, his demeanor now completely different from the intimidating figure who had delivered her life story like an indictment when she first entered his office. As the doors opened to take her back to the world below, he handed her a business card with his personal phone number written on the back. "Call me when you have told Sophia about tonight," he said, his voice carrying a note of nervousness that made him seem more human than she would have thought possible. "Let me know what questions she has, what concerns, what she needs to feel safe about meeting the man who wants to become her father. And Maria Elena, thank you for being the kind of mother who raised the kind of daughter worth saving. Isabella would have liked Sophia, and Sophia is going to love hearing stories about the sister she never got to meet." As the elevator descended toward the casino floor, where normal life continued, unaware of the miracles happening 40 stories above, Maria Elena thought about the conversation she would have with Sophia in a few hours. The way her daughter's face would light up when she learned that the medicine she needed would finally be available, that the future they had been afraid to imagine was suddenly within reach. But mostly, she thought about Vincent Castellano, sitting alone in his office, staring out at the city he controlled while remembering a little girl who'd been gone for 22 years and preparing to love another little girl who desperately needed a father strong enough to fight the battles she could not win alone. The casino cleaning lady who had entered that office carrying fear and desperation was gone forever, replaced by a woman who understood that sometimes the most important families are built from the pieces of other broken families, strengthened by shared loss, and held together by the decision to choose love over fear, even when the future seems impossibly complicated. Tomorrow night, Sophia would meet the man who wanted to claim her as his own, and Maria Elena knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together as something more powerful than either of them could be alone.